To whom it may concern. My name is Vince Buteel. I'm a lived experience volunteer with Vancouver Coastal Health and also a proud participant of the Belonging Matters Dialogues and Framework. And today I'd just like to share a little bit about my experience with Belonging Matters and how it's impacted my life and how I've seen it. It's also impacted my community and service providers. With that, I'd like to begin with the end in mind. 12 years old, I thought I was going to grow up, be married, have kids, vacations. I was going to be a fireman. I was going to be a policeman. In my mind back then, I thought I was going to be Evel Knievel. And flash forward 49 years old, homeless, sleeping on a piece of cardboard in Surrey, British Columbia, snow, getting assaulted, getting spit on, getting items, food, drinks thrown on me, getting ridiculed, being stigmatized, being kicked out of restaurants and places where I was just trying to keep warm because I had nowhere else to go just because of the way I looked and the way I smelled. And that's where my journey led me. But I think it's really important to back up because especially when it comes to belonging matters, it's important for me to share with you how it's impacted my life now. At the same time, belonging matters is where my wheels came off my cart at the very beginning too. At 12 years old, when I was having those dreams and those aspirations about myself and where I thought my life was going to go, I was being molested. I was being bullied not only at school, but in on my block where I lived. There was a lot of things going on. I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted to feel a part of. And in an adolescent's mind, I decided I needed to do something to stop it. What I decided was I just need to act like to fit in. So I put on a mask. I got into drugs, alcohol, gangs, dealing, organized crime. By 19 years old, when everything really came down to it, I had been shot, stabbed, and I made another decision. Instead of looking back to my authentic self and just returning to those passions that I had as a child, art, music, plays, writing, I decided, well, putting on a mask worked before, I'll do it again. And I began the process of looking for someone to save me. And I met someone who was looking for someone to save. We got married, we had 3 beautiful children, and I went on with my life, trying to be somebody I wasn't. I was a financial broker for about 3 or 4 years in my 20s, very successful. And then I became an industrial refrigeration mechanic. I had all these tickets. I was making 6 figures a year. But the wheels were still coming off. Back at 19, I thought drugs and the crowd I was hanging around with was the problem. So I just continued on drinking. It's like switching seats on the Titanic. I picked a more comfortable seat to watch the inevitable, which was going down with the ship. I got DUIs. My wife left me. I lost my kids. Lost my job. Drunk tanks. Got a 6-figure income, a 6-figure settlement from ICBC from being run over by a car in 2015. Well, I got run over by the car in 2012, but I got the settlement, in 2016. And I blew through that in 6 months, and I was homeless and I had nothing to my name except for a backpack and the clothes on my back. I was at Richmond Hospital here in British Columbia, and my dad had dropped me off. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. My dad wouldn't give me any more money or any more support. He said, every dollar we give to you, we're killing you. So you either, I can drop you off in a back alley or drop you off to get help. And I knew I needed to be detoxed, so I went to Richmond Hospital, And the doctor told me and my dad, if I have one more drink, I'm dead. That's it. Game over. And it was a nurse at Richmond Hospital who was the very first impact on my life. And this is where my journey with Belonging Matters began. I didn't recognize it at the time until meeting Jessie and going through the framework. And then all the pieces of the puzzle came together. She sat there and she sat down beside me. Now, I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity, well, hopefully you haven't, but if you've been in a hospital, nurses are always coming and going and they're always standing at your bedside. How many of you have actually had a nurse pull up a chair and sit down on your bedside and look at you? That's what she did for me. I admitted into that hospital before, and she just looked at me honestly and said, Vince, what's going on? You're struggling. Talk to me. I have never had anybody approach me from a service provider standpoint and ask me genuinely what's going on. It's always looking down at a chart, check mark, check mark, check mark, or giving opinions, tell me what I have to do, this, that, and the other thing. Nobody had ever asked me how I was feeling. And that's the biggest thing I think about when it comes to service providers. And I've said this before when I give speeches. You know, when you get admitted to a hospital, a doctor's office, a clinic, they can send us for x-rays, they can send us for CT scans, they can take our blood, they can take our blood pressure. They can ask us questions, based on what they're observing with us. You know, do you hurt here? Do you hurt there? And things like that. There is no medical exam, as far as I know. I mean, maybe there is. I don't think so. There's no medical exam that can tell you what's going on between these two things right here. And everybody's an individual. Everybody experiences different situations based on how they were raised and what they experienced growing up. One person might come in with a broken arm and it's like, oh, whatever. You know, with myself, I come in and I have a broken bone or something. I'm traumatized. I'm having flashbacks. I'm reliving childhood experiences. But you can't test for that kind of stuff. But this nurse sat there and she listened to me and I cried and I talked to her. And I was probably blabbering nonsense for most of the time. But she had enough respect for me. She said nothing. She didn't criticize. She didn't judge. She just listened to me. And then she referred me on to a group that would come in through the hospital called the DART team. They specialize in drugs and alcohol. And they came, same thing. They did not criticize, judge. They didn't interrupt me. They allowed me to talk and blah, blah, blah. Probably like I'm about to here for you. Sorry if this takes a little long. But I think this is very important. And I think if you hang on for my long-winded explanation here, you'll see exactly why this is important, what I'm saying. They gave me information. One of those cards I pulled out, it had a list of everything I needed. I needed housing. I needed food. I needed to get off alcohol and drugs. I mean, that was an obvious thing. And there's probably a lot of other things that I needed also. So I called that number. And a caseworker came out. Morgan Melosh from Turning Point Recovery Society. Same thing. She didn't bring a notepad or nothing. And she told me flat out, she goes, I just want to get to know you today. And then we'll find out what you want. And then I'll come back again if you want me to. And she just talked to me like a friend. Like somebody who cared. I called her again the next day. She was there within 2 hours at my bedside with all the information. And the information she brought, and here's another key point. She didn't tell me this is what you have to do. She said, here's some suggestions according to what you said yesterday, moving forward, that I'm bringing to you. And here are possible outcomes. What do you think you want to do? She allowed me to make the decisions. And that's what I did. And she promised me that she would advocate and support me in all those things. And that's exactly what she did. I entered Turning Point Men's Recovery House here in Richmond. I spent 6 months there, and I had decided to become a yes person. My thinking had got me into the situation I was in. So I had this feeling, according to Morgan and everybody in the house, that maybe I should trust somebody else and just say yes. And what's the worst that could happen? I got involved with transitions. I got a counselor. I took part in groups, anti-anxiety groups, meditation groups, and mindfulness. Oh my God. That was the biggest thing for me, mindfulness groups. I took the same course 3 times because it was just mind-blowing. Every time I took the course, it wasn't that I was viewing the world differently. I was viewing myself differently, and my perspective of the world was changing. I got involved with Pathways Clubhouse, mental health clubhouse here locally in Richmond. At first I thought, well, they're going to think I'm crazy or this or that. And I thought, no, it's from anything from depression to schizophrenia. I'm going to do it anyways. They gave me a sense of belonging there. They actually gave me a temporary employment job doing my passion, artwork, at the Richmond Arts and Cultural Center here in Richmond. Every decision I made based on suggestions that were given to me turned out to be working out for me. And because they were suggestions and I was making the decision, it was self-empowering. There was that sense of belonging, not only exterior to all these places I was getting involved with, but on the inside. All of a sudden something was starting to, make sense to me. And then of course I was involved with AA, SMART, and there's all these other different organizations. And those are just vehicles. I'm not here to promote any type of recovery vehicle. The most important recovery vehicle I have is right here. It's me. And I do not think that there's any one correct way. There is no one in-the-box solution. There is no microwave solution to homelessness, to addiction, to anything like that. Housing, we need housing. But that's not the answer. I worked as an outreach worker, and people who were street entrenched, having them housed was not enough because I didn't have the life skills. There's so much more involved in this. It's a bigger picture. But if you create that sense of belonging where you encourage that person, they're making decisions for themselves, they're moving forward, and they see that their decisions, they can see the impact that it's having on their own life. That's where change happens. It's not by supplying a house. It's not by anything else you can give somebody. I don't believe in handouts. I believe in hand-ups. But sometimes a handout is a hand-up. And so basically what happened was I became a lived experience volunteer with Coastal Health. I was feeling good about myself, and I was asked to do this. I became part of the Belonging Matters dialogue and the framework and everything. And honestly, I thought that we were just going to be developing something to improve system access, reduce stigma, safer housing for people involved in the opioid crisis. But what I found out was that was this much of what this program is really about. And what this program, the change that has impacted me the most has been internal. Not what I do with the group, the posters we came up with, the speeches we give, or anything like that. And that happened pretty quickly working with Jesse Sutherland and Belonging Matters. Right away, we had the Belonging Matters dialogues. And here's a group of street drug users. They were homeless. They've all experienced kind of the same thing. And Jesse was in the room. There was other service providers in the room. And I totally forgot there were service providers in the room. Everybody was just it was like talking to somebody when I was homeless, sitting behind a dumpster and just chatting what it really feels like and those real things. And then developing the posters, and that passion started to build. And I think the first thing I missed that was my first clue to a change happening within me was when I started doing drugs. One of the first things I gave up was my artwork. my passion for art, not only creating art, but museums, live stage productions, music, everything like that. It wasn't acceptable. I was mocked. And the key was that everybody came up with that they wanted to combat was stigma with health providers. And I sat down and I closed my eyes and I thought, I'm going to come up with a piece of artwork that represents stigma to me. What does stigma look like? And this is what I came up with. This, well, obviously it's a lion, and you can see stigma in the mane. That's what stigma is. It's fear. It's unfounded fear. In my head, I was always thinking people are judging me. They think this, they think that. And some of the times it was true, some of the times it wasn't. But it was unfounded. And just like this lion, this is a piece of paper with a piece of artwork on it. It is a scary... I have nothing to fear to a piece of artwork. And I started seeing that I was doing that to myself. You know, stigmatization, I was allowing fear to control my life. I started looking a little bit more into how I was. And then I was so honored to sit down with the nurses of Richmond Hospital's ER department to do an educational series, a 3-part educational series. So I was honored to sit down with the same nurses who saw me at my worst and say, this is where I came from, this is what happened, and this is where I am now. And I had nurses in tears that knew me. And it was so healing, not only for me, but then I learned that they only see us for one day. They don't know, and they always wonder, I wonder what happens to this person. I wonder what happens to that person. There are so many things about this program, not only for the participants, but for those that we speak to or do plays for, or whatever the end result of Belonging Matters for your community is, whatever that looks like, it affects a community. And that's what this really has brought home to me. I'm a part of a community now. I have self-respect and I have dignity. And I treat others with respect and dignity. I don't feel judged. I don't feel criticized. I have those times of insecurity still, but I speak up. And every time I speak up, every time I talk to nurses, doctors, psychiatrists, RCMP, whatever it is, my self-confidence goes up. I feel a part of. I sit on committees with psychiatrists and doctors and RCMP. And I don't get treated any differently than anybody else. But, you know, in my head, I'd be thinking, well, who am I? Like, I was on the street 2 years ago. But that's not the fact. If you want to solve a problem in your community, create a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and bring whoever is involved in those decision-making procedures, bring them all together with people with lived experience. I strongly urge this. Bring them together and have a dialogue, whether it's to improve system access, reduce stigma, create awareness, whatever it is. I think this is something that should be taught in school, seriously. I was bullied in high school. You know what? I'm very grateful that I was not raised in a generation like today where there's computers on top of things. I used to sit in the bushes and eat my lunch. Nowadays, you can't hide. Anyways, I just really like to thank you for listening to me probably ramble on a little bit. And I'd really like to thank Jessie Sutherland and her Belonging Matters framework. It literally was the last piece of my puzzle. I have my kids back. I have family back. I have dignity and respect. My voice matters. And I have a purpose in life. And even though I'm in a power wheelchair, attitude is everything. And that's what my parents told me a long time ago. Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to what happens to you. And that's exactly what this dialogue brings to others. If you have an issue in your community, this might not be an instant, quick fix solution, but it is a solution. It has been in my life. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.